Hi, everybody, and welcome to another edition of Speaking Of. Today, we're speaking of citation and provenance, the difference between them, and why that difference is critical to ensuring the quality and value of our information. And when I say we, I mean me and my special guest, John Martin, who's founder and CEO at Redfile AI. He's a veteran information guy, patent holder, and the author of a recent LinkedIn post on this subject that I found to be spot on. John, thanks for joining us. Let's say you briefly introduce yourself. We'll go from there.
Sure. Thanks for having me. I appreciate the opportunity. My name is John Martin. I'm the founder and CEO of Redfile. My background is former Army with a security clearance, worked in data my entire career, e-discovery, data governance, data migration, and even things as far afield as having to redact particular kinds of images out of all kinds of format documents. So, but these days, more along the lines of technology designed to clean up foundational AI problems.
You were kind enough to let me dragoon you into this conversation. I read your piece, and I will put a link to the piece in the show notes below. For those of you who want to read it, I encourage you to do so. But in our exchange, after you posted, you wrote, and I'm going to quote a little thing here because it's what kind of sparked my thinking and prompted my invitation. So you wrote, "I keep thinking that we spend enormous energy arguing over conclusions while quietly skipping the part where we validate the premises and explain why the effort matters to the business. That gap is where most bad decisions seem to sneak in." And I want to parse that a little bit because in my experience, what often gets lost is this, why does it matter to the business? That's my whole stake in the ground. Question number one, what business problem are you trying to solve? The rest is just details. That's the t-shirt.
Yeah.
And all I got was this stupid t-shirt. But you raise a really critical point in your piece. So we back up a little bit further, in that quotation. The difference between citation and provenance. So maybe you could tell us in your words, what is the difference? Why do we care? And what led you to make that distinction so clearly?
Well, the way I think about it, provenance is being able to track and deterministically account for what is best evidence. What is the some people call it a golden document or something along those lines. Citation is simply a reference to a piece of provenance which may or may not be accurate. It may or may not be the golden document. So to me, the first step is to deterministically prove what is, what should be referenced. It's kind of like my personal view on PowerPoint. I think bullet points are useless. I don't think they should ever be used in PowerPoint simply because they only matter or have context when the author of the PowerPoint is talking about them. That's it. It would be, to me, much more logical and much more, accurate to include hyperlinks instead, pointing to provenance, pointing to the exact thing that the author was meaning at the time, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. I hadn't actually thought about it from the standpoint of bullet points. It is a very apt analogy. As someone who presents a lot, it's like, well, how do you do that on a screen in a room full of people? But in terms of the takeaway, that's easy to do. In the PowerPoint or in the PDF. Yeah.
Yeah, you can highlight the bullet point and embed a link.
Right.
And then that takes all the guesswork out of the equation.
Well, and we'll make the grand leap that everybody's perhaps waiting for, because you can't get too far in any conversation these days without utilizing the letters A and I
Mm-hmm.
in juxtaposition. Without having been able to articulate it quite so succinctly, I realize this is one of my biggest peeves regarding AI. Well, even as recently as 6 or 8 months ago, you could go on an AI engine and ask a question and get all kinds of stuff back, and it wouldn't give you even citations. Now they do, many of them. But to your point exactly, I figured out that's a citation to what? The thing that's necessary there is now go look at what's being cited and see, does it even exist really?
Yeah, the thing about AIs, people for whatever reason think that larger and larger models are the way to go. And back in about 2015, I was doing some work with one of the two big AI players back then. So from that you can derive it was either Palantir or Watson, one or the other. And essentially, I kept getting called into these meetings with their fellows, with the people that they believe to be the 100 smartest people in that company, and they would say things like, "We want to understand the world," and I would go, "Wow, that seems like a really, really bad idea." They're Cardassians out there and stuff, right? Like, how is understanding that going to positively affect a business unless it's a Cardassian-owned business, right? It just doesn't track. So what they were saying and what they seem to be missing is in data, there's always more noise than signal. And the problem that, or one of the problems, there are many problems, but one of the problems AI has is it's purely text-based. So essentially, it gets text, but it doesn't understand context. And I've seen this in litigation where a lawyer would hold or show an email, and he'd say, "Look, I have the evidence," and I would look at it and go, "No, you have what we call in the military a message fragment," because you don't know if that's the 5th reply or the 17th reply, or if it was forwarded earlier and then replied to again. You've got no clue. I could send an email to you and say, "Hey, what do you think about Bob?" And you could say, "Oh, Bob's an ass." And, I could go, "Yeah, I really love that guy." Okay, well, if all you see is Bob's an ass and you don't see me and don't understand, that's just guys busting chops, right?
Right.
Then all of a sudden it has this pseudo nefarious meaning because you don't have provenance into what the whole conversation actually meant. And AI has that problem in spades. I always think of AI, it's like, it's like it's like your 12-year-old cousin when you're 18 and playing football for the high school team. They want to hang out with you and they want to make you happy. They want to please you. And that's their number one driving goal, not accuracy. What they're good at is they're good at saying something that's plausible, not accurate. And a lot of people can't tell the difference between those two things. So, they will make stuff up on occasion, or they will simply draw the wrong conclusion from a probabilistic standpoint because they think it matters to you and it will make you happy. So that's my kind of nutshell interpretation of how most of them operate.
Yeah, I think that's fair. There certainly are technologies out there that can operate on non-text files.
Right.
But the
But
point you're making still holds.
all the LLM structures were built from text.
Yes, and for me, it just further reinforces how the responsibility really is that of the human participant who can apply some discernment. Again, I'm kind of working backwards from the right end of the sentence, because what that means is to apply proper discernment, you have to really understand what it is you're trying to do. What are you going to do with the information that you're trying to get the AI assistance on?
Correct.
Because otherwise there are a lot of things that sound like, yeah, that feels right.
Yeah, like I said, it's plausible.
Yeah. So, I mean, we could go on and on about just AI things. And just to that note, a little commercial for myself, which I don't typically do, actually, but there are other interviews like this I've done on the subject of AI. And it's a while ago now when I first heard somebody use the phrase small language models. And I went, yes, aha, yes. Because the best use of a tool like AI is is to apply it to your own situation using your own data that has not been diluted by data pulled from other even irrelevant sources. Like you said, like the Kardashians. You know, and if you're not paying for a service and you're not paying to have it be kind of walled off from everybody else, you log into one of these, I call them public services. You give them your email and you can use it. All you're doing is feeding into the model, and everybody else has access to the information you're putting in there. It might pop out in exactly the form that you're putting it. So like the number of times I talk to organizations, they want to try it out first. That's great. But they're using like real data and real personal information. And it's like, holy cow, don't do that.
There are a lot of things around. You can call them small language models. I call them corporate language models. Mm-hmm. The issue with that is you can take a language model, and preferably 3, because then you have pivot points and you can't tie on anything. But you have to kind of Venn diagram, okay, this language model is good at this, and this one's good at this, and this one's good at that. And then there's going to be, when you put those 3 language models together into your Venn diagram, there's going to be components that only one of them is good at. And that's good. That's a good thing, because you do want creative, but you want creative moderated by deterministic and very, very succinct. So, the way I approach that is basically you say, here's the corporation, and let's say it's a energy trading company. Mm-hmm. So what I do is I look at it and I go, okay, what's their SIC code? Who are their regulators? Okay, well, if it's an energy trading company, that's FERC, FINRA, and the IRS. So, okay, let's load everything they have. Let's pull all the regulator data in. Now, let's turn around and let's go to the PTO, which we have downloaded the whole thing, and let's go in and find everything that they have either applied for a patent, been granted a patent, applied for a trademark, or been granted a trademark, because those are high dollar words about the very core things that company cares about and is important and is an asset. And then once you put those two things together, then we ingest the corporate data, whether it's documents or CAD drawings or pictures or audio or video or whatever. And we do what we call text gen it, which means if it doesn't have text, we add text. If it's audio, we add text. If it's video, we add text. And at that point, we now have something that's ingestible, but we do it in a consistent JSON format, which I call 3DI JSON. And what that does is that tells you everything about that file object. It's completely deterministic, completely accurate about the file. It even has emotional analysis embedded, and whether it's a significant communication and language translation if it happens to be in Korean and you need it in English so that you can analyze it. So that just solves tons of problems that AI has. AI, if you think about it, not only is it limited by text initially when you're talking about building a corporate language model, but it's also limited by grammar and sentence structure, because that's the core of everything. Okay, well, what are you leaving behind if that's the case? Well, PowerPoints tend to be lists of nouns. There's not really a lot of sentence structure in a PowerPoint. Same thing for Excel spreadsheets, financial reports, bank statements, on and on and on and on. So if you don't have a way of deterministically indicating that, then the AI is going to fail or miss it or just be blind to it. Whereas, if you can do that, you're now not looking at 12% of your corporate documents. You're looking at 98% of your corporate documents. And, we support about 3,800 file formats. So, you go from AI that normally is used to about, a few dozen file formats up to 3,800. And the deal is the LLM only needs to understand one JSON format to get there, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it does. It does. And I have like all these thoughts now swirling in my head. I don't know if I have an order that I want to go through them all. I also know our time generally here today, it's limited. I have a feeling you and I could drink quite a lot of coffee or other things together and talk about this for a while. That's an invitation.
We could shut down the Starbucks. Yes.
There's so much that I like about that approach. It's comprehensiveness, certainly. What are you leaving behind and all that. And I'm also saying, okay, if we look at a more quote unquote conventional approach to data cleanup or classification or what have you, working my way back towards, citation versus provenance.
Mm-hmm.
I think what you just said effectively is you're just skipping over the citation part altogether. You're building a foundation that is provenant. I don't know what the word form is.
Yeah, you build what I call foundational provenance. And, when you go out and you harvest your data from all these different sources, whether it's a notebook or whether it's, a SharePoint server or cloud storage or whatever, essentially, as you collect that information, you not only want the file object and the metadata of the file object, but you also want what the file system storing it says about that object.
Mm-hmm.
Because I've done data collections, into hundreds of millions of files. And when you get in that level, if you hash the file, okay, now I've got a fingerprint. Because I don't care what the name is, I don't care what the location is, I just care in memory what's the hash of that object. Well, we've done projects before where we have an energy company that has 17 file shares, 35 million files, according to the IT department. We go through and we harvest that information. There's 17 million files, not 35. Why? Because we're deduplicating as we're pulling it. But we now have a provenance chain for each one of those hashes, because we can see that there's a machine over here that the file system metadata says that was written in 2007 to that file system. And then it was later put in managed storage, and then it was later attached to 6 different emails over a 4-year period. And then it was migrated into cloud. Okay, that's great, but those are just locations of the one hash, the way I look at it. So from that standpoint, I can give you lineage, not just provenance, but a lineage of everywhere this thing is sat, and everywhere or every when it occurred in there. Okay, well, if you can answer what, where, when, and who, it's really easy to figure out why and how. Right? So to me, the best data and the best information is that you can prove and create a histogram for each one of them. Because if you see something that's dated 2012 and you can't find any file system in your organization that shows it was written anywhere since just as far back as 2020, yet the metadata says it's from 2012. Okay, so one day it just magically materialized onto a drive somewhere, right? Or it's a forgery. It's not an authentic file. So when you apply really stupid, simple logic like that, because you have a point of reference, the odds of somebody planting a bogus file from 2007 until last week 27 times on 14 different storage devices is pretty low. So that one I'd be comfortable with. The one that says it was created and last modified in 2012, but I can't find it anywhere on any store except in 2020 forward, that I got a problem with.
Yeah. No, it is something of a different take on a pretty common issue. See, again, I got more plates spinning in my head. So a couple things. This approach sounds like a fairly hefty lift technologically, and I imagine from a budgetary perspective. Or does it scale downwards to a point where it is accessible? I guess the question in there is, how low can you go with this kind of an approach before it becomes overkill?
The bottom line is, if you think about it, if you 3DI is three-dimensional interface or three-dimensional inference, and it operates the 3 legs on the stool. And at this point, there are probably 800 legs on the stool. I just didn't want to rename the damn thing. So, it was a graphic analysis followed by an attribute. It was graphic content attribute. That's the 3 legs on the stool. So the reason you go graphic first is because not everything has text, right? So if you go with graphic, everything you can see and even smell and taste can be expressed as a gas chromatograph plot. So graphic covers 100% of everything you've got. But everybody in the world for the last 30 or 40 years focus on text, right? That's the primary OCR, text extraction, text search engines, etc. Well, let's think about that for a minute. If I have a 5-page document and it's got perfect text in it, what's the first thing every single technology out there does? It extracts the text and it converts it from a 5-page document to a 35-foot long sentence. Because that's what a text index is. It's a string.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, once you have a string of text, there's only 2 ways to search that. Either ordinally, this word or phrase before or after that word or phrase, or proximity, this word or phrase within so many words of that word or phrase. So, if you go through all the different methodologies people use, and they'll say, you'll hear people say Bayesian, and you'll hear people say k-means nearest neighbor, and hidden Markov model, and hyperspace, and all these text algorithms. All they do is weight those 2 ways of searching. You're still not searching other than proximity or ordinal. They're just weighting what the outcome is. That's all. So when you make the 35-foot long sentence, what have you lost? Well, you don't know where bold was. You don't know where red was. You don't know where italic was. You don't know what was centered. You don't. Right. So you've thrown away 85 or 90% of the useful information that us as humans use to identify things, to classify things. And think about it this way. If I printed an email onto a piece of paper, and I printed a magazine article onto a piece of paper, and I stood 40 feet away from you, and I held one in my right hand and one in my left hand, you can't read the text. You may not even be able to tell what language they're in, but you damn sure can tell which one's the email, right?
Yeah.
Why? Purely graphical analysis. So that's what I've been doing for, Lord, 20-something years. So in the how low can you go category, you can go really, really low, because once you've classified documents this way and you've determined what they are deterministically, then you know what to do with them. Yep. Why do you need a GRC rules engine in your corporate stack if you know this is a 1099 tax document? That's a lookup. All you got to do is, oh, wait, what does the IRS say? How long we got to keep that thing? Oh, bing, ding, 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 checkbox, done. There are no rules. That also means there is no human in the loop labor cost to check the rules engine anymore. You don't need it because you know what it is. That's a concept that's been just completely lost in modern electronic data.
Yeah, no, I mean, I could quibble with some of the vocabulary maybe, but the point I think is an excellent one. I mean, there is a rule. The rule is if it's this kind of form, this is its retention period. Therefore,
right.
Keep it. So it's not like yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah. Let me clarify. What I'm saying is you don't need to spend $200,000 a year on a rules engine.
Right.
If you know what it is, because if you know what it is, it's a lookup as to how long you keep it.
Right.
If you think about the tech stack in most modern corporations, I would say somewhere around 30 or 40% of that stack exists simply to accommodate uncertainty. That's the only reason those tools are in that stack. And that's, in a medium-sized business, that's a couple of million a year in license fees, not counting the human cost.
Yeah. And I'm looking at the clock, so I'll try to stop asking questions for today. But, the point you just made is another favorite of mine. If you start from the vantage point of your traditional records manager,
Mhm.
who in so many companies, they don't get no respect, like Rodney Dangerfield, right? I'm pulling at my tie
Exactly.
like he did. He's a comedian from long ago, for those who don't know. Um, the notion of what's in the technology stack and why is it there, and it's like a foreign concept.
Yeah.
And I do
It
find
go,
very often
yeah.
it's, yeah, go ahead.
No, I was going to say it goes back to your earlier point of what's the business purpose of that being there, right?
Right.
That you're 100% right. That question does not get asked nearly enough.
Right. And so you end up with all this stuff. And as you say, it's there kind of for risk protection. It's, it's insurance, really. What if we need it? What if we get sued? It's like, well, there's reasons not to have it. In case you do get sued, you don't want it. But, starting from the vantage point of records management, one of the reasons I find this topic so fascinating, and the reason that we keep weaving in and out of AI and provenance and citation, and now we're talking basically about business justification, it is a single ball of wax. A lot of this stuff, I think, grew up through different technology stacks, and so we tend to think them as being separate, but they're really not. So
No.
even working from the other side, from the data side, why do we care about all the documents? You have to look at both. A lot of the stuff that's in the documents got drawn from a database somewhere, and it just showed up on
Correct.
paper or screen or PDF or something. So, as somebody said to me,
I actually did a project where we were doing data classification, and we classified a whole bunch of documents, and they were all, applying this rule and that rule, keep this 3 years, keep that 7 years, keep this 3 years past when the lease expires, that conditional stuff. But what was interesting is we started going through it. I started saying, okay, what's the provenance of this? Where does this come from? Well, these PDFs here are all generated from SAP. And I said, oh, okay, well then we don't need to keep the PDF because SAP is a governance system, and therefore you can just regenerate this whenever you want to. But people, I don't think very many people at all take it to that level. They don't go, okay, where else is this data, and is it already a governed source?
right.
Right.
And for me, governing in place is just fine.
Yeah.
You don't need, and then you roll into just basics of security and things. Well, what does that have to do with a record of a lease it's like, well, I know I'm supposed to store it over here, but I can't have access to it because the security is set wrong or something. But we need to work on it in our department, so we put it over here in the shared drive that everybody can get to. And that's wrong.
And you probably just open the door for a lawyer later on after a cyber breach to say, did you consistently follow your policies and procedures about security and storage? And the answer is no, we did not. Why? Because it's hard. I mean, and boom, here comes the monetary amount you're going to pay now for that. So
yeah. No, it's boy, we could talk so much more about this. I think we won't anymore for today. Thank you for spending all this time.
Absolutely.
Definitely. Let's stay in touch. We'll have you back at some point. Maybe we'll be in the same city at the same time. We can get together. The folks who are watching, thanks for tuning in. Reach out to either of us anytime. Speaking personally, I really enjoy these conversations, but at the end of the day, they're really more for you guys than it is for me. So let's keep the conversation going. Email, LinkedIn, all the places. Thank you, John. This has been Speaking Of with Steve Weissman, the InfoGov Guy, a Hollywood production.